The battlefield shakes with thunder. A knight charges forward on his horse. His armor flashes in the sunlight like a mirror of steel. Banners wave. The crowd cheers. To everyone watching, he looks like a hero out of legend. A man of honor. A man of glory. A man destined to live forever in stories. But the truth was far darker. Behind the shining armor was a human body, fragile, tired, and easy to break. Behind the cheers was a world filled with blood, disease, and fear. Most knights didn't live long enough to grow old. Their lives were short, brutal, and uncertain. Every battle, every wound, every night of sickness pushed them closer to the grave. Knighthood promised honor. It promised land, respect, and fame. But in reality, it delivered exhaustion, pain, and death before 40. So why did most medieval knights die young? Stay with me, because the truth is far worse than the legends ever told. Becoming a knight looked glorious in stories, but the road to knighthood was brutal, and it began in childhood. At just 7 years old, noble boys were sent away from home. Torn from their mother's arms, they were placed in the castle of another lord. Here they became pages. Their days were spent carrying trays, cleaning rooms, serving at tables, and running endless errands. They polished armor, groomed horses, and watched their elders fight. To them, knighthood seemed like a shining prize waiting at the end of hard work. But most didn't realize their real trial was only beginning. By the age of 14, a boy became a squire. This is where the dream turned into pain. Training was relentless. They learned to ride for hours, until thighs burned and legs cramped. They lifted heavy shields and wore chainmail until their shoulders felt broken. They sparred with wooden swords, the blows leaving bruises deep and purple. They practiced with lances that could knock the wind from their lungs, and when their bodies ached, they were told to do it again. Because war would not wait for comfort. Injuries were constant. Broken arms from falling off horses, cracked ribs from jousting practice, cuts and scars that never healed properly. Without good food or medicine, a small wound could fester into infection. Without clean water, sickness spread fast. Some squires died before they ever raised a real sword. Others were crippled, sent home in shame. The path to knighthood was not a straight road. It was littered with the broken bodies of boys who never made it. For the few who did survive, the day of knighthood was celebrated with ceremony and pride. The boy knelt, received the sword, and rose as a knight. But the price had already been paid. Years of pain, years of sacrifice, and the scars of training that never left their bodies. Knighthood was not a gift. It was bought with blood, sweat, and childhood lost. And for every knight who rode into battle, there were many more who never survived the journey that far. This was the moment every knight was trained for, the battlefield, the place where legends were made and lives were lost. Knights rode into combat, covered in armor, shields raised, lances lowered. From a distance, they looked unstoppable, steel glinting in the sunlight, banners snapping in the wind. But once the charge began, the illusion of safety vanished. Battle was chaos. Arrows rained from the sky. Crossbow bolts punched through armor and into flesh. Swords clashed. Axes crushed helmets. Maces shattered bones with a single strike. Horses screamed and fell, throwing riders into the mud. And once a knight hit the ground, he was trapped. Armor that once protected now became a prison, heavy, suffocating, impossible to escape quickly. Many knights were finished off where they fell, stabbed through gaps in their armor, trampled under hooves. Even victory left scars, broken jaws from maces, arrows lodged in shoulders and legs, deep cuts that bled for days, and every wound risked infection, a death sentence in itself. Knights dreamed of honor, but the battlefield offered little of it. There was no order, no mercy, just mud, blood, and the screams of men dying all around. Takeaway. For every knight who survived a battle, Death was never far behind. Every campaign, every clash, every wound brought them closer to an early grave. If the sword didn't kill a knight, something else often did. Disease, the enemy you could not see. Knights lived in dirty places, floors covered in straw and waste, animals kept close for food, rats everywhere, lice in the beds, fleas biting at the skin. Every bite could turn into sickness. When armies camped, it was even worse. Thousands of men together, no toilets, no clean water, food rotting fast, streams filled with waste, illness spread quickly from one man to another. Dysentery made men weak, fevers swept through tents, and when plague arrived, whole groups of soldiers died in days. Even inside castles, knights were not safe. Meat spoiled, water made people sick. One cough in a crowded hall spread to everyone. Even a small cut could rot and kill if left untreated. The truth, more knights died from disease than from swords. The deadliest enemy lived inside their own camps. A knight's armor looked powerful, shiny, strong, but inside it was a prison. Full armor could weigh 60 to 80 pounds. That's like carrying a child on your back all day long. Marching in the heat, fighting in mud, riding for hours. Every step drained strength. Knights often fainted from exhaustion. Some collapsed in the middle of battle. Heat built up inside the metal like an oven. Sweat poured until the body had nothing left to give. Dehydration set in. Muscles gave out. Some knights died without a single wound, killed only by heat and exhaustion. And when a knight fell in full armor, it was almost impossible to get up quickly. If he collapsed in battle, the armor that once protected him now trapped him. Many were crushed under horses or finished off by enemies before they could even rise. The truth, armor could save a knight from a sword, but it could also steal his life through exhaustion, heat, and sheer weight. Even when a knight survived battle, the danger was not over. Because medieval medicine was almost as deadly as the wound itself. Doctors had little real knowledge. They believed sickness came from bad air or from the body's balance of blood. Their solution, bloodletting, cutting a vein to drain blood. It only made weak men weaker. If a wound became infected, the choices were worse. Sometimes the answer was amputation, cutting off an arm or a leg, with no pain medicine, no clean tools. The pain was unbearable. Most men fainted. Some never woke up again. Other times, wounds were burned shut with red-hot iron. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. It stopped the bleeding, but not the infection. Many knights died days later from fever and blood poisoning. Herbs, prayers, charms. These were the cures most knights had, but they did little against real disease. Even a small cut from a rusty blade could turn into a death sentence. The truth, a knight didn't just fight against enemies on the battlefield. He fought against his own wounds, and too often the wounds won. Not every knight fell on the battlefield. Some met their end much closer to home, in tournaments and training fields that were supposed to prepare them for glory, or worse, in the games meant to entertain a crowd. Jousting was the sport of kings. Picture it, 2 armored riders thundering across the field, lances lowered, banners waving in the wind, trumpets blared, crowds shouted. It looked like a glorious display of skill and courage. But beneath the cheering, death was always waiting. Even a blunted lance carried the force of a sledgehammer. When wood splintered on impact, sharp shards could shoot like arrows, slipping through gaps in armor. One unlucky strike could smash a skull, blind an eye, or shatter ribs. And once a knight fell to the ground, the weight of armor turned him into a helpless target. A horse's hooves could crush him before he had time to rise. Even the powerful were not safe. In 1559, King Henry II of France entered a joust to celebrate peace. His opponent's lance shattered and drove through the slit of his helmet, piercing his eye and brain. The king lingered for days in agony before dying. If a king, surrounded by the best armor, the best doctors, and the best care, could be killed in a game, what chance did ordinary knights have? And tournaments were not the only danger. Training was just as deadly. Young squires sparred daily with wooden swords, but wood could still break bones. Broken arms, cracked jaws, and bleeding heads were common. A single mistake during practice could leave a boy crippled for life. Falls from horses often ended in crushed chests or shattered legs. Even simple drills, a misplaced strike or a slip in the mud, could end a career before it ever began. Knights also trained in mock battles, called melees, where dozens fought at once. These games often turned into real combat. Blows, meant to be controlled, grew wild. Knights struck too hard, tempers flared, and blood spilled. Men were maimed or killed in what was supposed to be sport. The truth, knighthood was dangerous even without war. Many never lived to see real combat. They died in training fields, in jousting arenas, or in mock battles that demanded blood. For knights, every day was a risk, because even the games could kill. Knights were more than just warriors. They were symbols of wealth, power, and honor, and that made them prime targets. On the battlefield, everyone wanted to bring down the man in shining armor. An ordinary soldier might be ignored in the chaos of combat, but a knight, he was a prize. If captured alive, he could be ransomed for gold. If killed, his fall could break the spirit of those who followed him. Either way, every enemy sword, every arrow, every spear was aimed at him. Imagine the pressure. You are weighed down in armor, surrounded by noise and blood. Arrows rain from above, spears stab from below, and you know every enemy around you has one thought: bring you down. Sometimes a knight was lucky. Captured rather than killed, he could be ransomed back to his family or lord. But ransom was not kindness, it was business. A knight might spend weeks, months, even years in chains, waiting for gold to be paid. Many died in captivity from hunger, disease, or mistreatment before ransom ever arrived. And sometimes there was no ransom at all. If an enemy hated the knight's lord, or if the battle was fueled by revenge, the knight could be executed on the spot. Heads struck from shoulders, bodies left to rot in the mud. His armor stripped and sold, his name forgotten. Even away from battle, danger followed. Knights were high-ranking targets for assassins, ambushes, and betrayal. A jealous rival might poison a cup. An enemy spy might slit a throat in the night. Status made a knight important, but it also painted a mark on his back. For every knight who stood tall in glory, dozens fell as trophies to others. Being a knight meant carrying honor, yes, but also a price tag. Every ride into battle was a gamble between life, ransom, or a bloody end. The truth, knighthood did not only make you powerful, it made you hunted. The shining armor that inspired awe in the crowd also made sure the enemy never let you escape alive. When we imagine knights, we picture men who lived long, heroic lives. Warriors growing old, telling stories by the fire, passing down their swords to sons. But the truth is very different. Most knights never saw old age. Many didn't even reach 40. The dangers were everywhere. Childhood training killed some before they ever earned the title. Battlefields swallowed thousands more in mud and blood. Disease struck in both castles and camps, cutting men down in days. Even accidents in tournaments or hunting could end a life instantly. A single mistake, a single wound, could shorten a future to nothing. Historical records showed just how harsh it was. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the average knight who went to war had a life expectancy of barely 30 or 35 years. A few reached their 40s, fewer still their 50s. To live past 60 was almost unheard of. The armor made them look invincible, but the numbers tell a darker story. Compare this to the peasants. Strange as it sounds, some peasants actually lived longer. They faced hunger, hard work, and disease, yes. But they weren't charging into battles, carrying heavy armor, or facing constant wounds. The knight ate better, lived higher, and fought harder, but he also died younger. Think about it. Every campaign, every joust, every patrol was a roll of the dice. The sword, the spear, the plague, the accident. Death waited at every corner. And a knight's rank didn't protect him. It only brought him closer to danger. For all the stories of knights in shining armor, very few lived long enough to enjoy the rewards of land, honor, or peace. The legends we remember are the rare exceptions. The rest, the nameless majority, died young, buried in fields far from home. The truth, knighthood was not a path to a long and noble life. It was a race against death, and almost every knight lost. Glory might have lived on in ballads and stories, but the men themselves were gone before their time. We look back at knights and see shining legends, glorious armor, noble banquets, heroic charges across green fields, but the truth of their lives was far harsher than the myths we tell today. Stone castles were cold prisons. Armor was a heavy cage. The battlefield was chaos and death. Disease, exhaustion, and wounds claimed far more lives than swords ever did. Most knights never grew old enough to enjoy the wealth or honor they fought for. By 30, many were already gone. By 40, most were dead. Only a rare few saw the age of 50. Behind the myth was pain. Behind the stories was fear. Behind every shining suit of armor was a man, tired, wounded, and closer to death than to glory. Knighthood gave power, yes, but it demanded everything in return: youth, health, even life itself. And yet, that is why their memory still lingers. Not because they were invincible, but because they endured the impossible. They stood in the face of fear, disease, and death, knowing their chances were slim. They were not the fairy tale heroes we imagine. They were men who paid the highest price for duty. So the next time you picture a knight in gleaming armor, don't just see the legend. See the human being inside, bruised, scarred, and fighting against time itself. See the boy taken at 7. The young squire broken in training. The warrior bleeding on the battlefield. The prisoner wasting away in chains. And understand, their greatest enemy was not always another man. It was the world they lived in. The truth of knighthood is not romance. It is struggle. It is endurance. It is the story of men who lived fast, fought hard, and died young. And that story matters, because history is not just kings, queens, and legends. It is people, real people, fighting battles we can barely imagine. Every knight who lived and died young left behind a lesson that survival itself was the greatest victory. If this story opened your eyes, don't let it end here. Hit the like button to keep history alive. Share this video so others can see the truth behind the myths. And subscribe, because more untold stories of the past are waiting. Stories that reveal not just the legends, but the people who lived, fought, and endured them.